Thanks, Joe. Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Claire. I work for a charity called Thames 21. And yeah, I've come to talk about our citizen science Freshwater Watch programme in the Cherwell and Ray Catchment. Um, as there aren't that many of us, feel free to sort of chip in with questions or write them in the chat as you think of them. Um, and yeah, good to know that some of you live near the Cherwell and Ray. Um, and the other tributaries. So I share an office with Joe sometimes, but yeah, I work for a charity called Thames, Thames 21, which has anyone heard of Thames 21 already? No, not many people know about them in this area. They're mainly based in London. We're about 20 years old. Well, we are 20 years old this year. Um, so it's quite an established charity. It started off with, as you can see from this picture, like litter picks on the Thames foreshore, and from then it's like expanded all over Greater London and some way up the Thames. I'm the sort of furthest north furthest upstream person. And they do all sorts of things. We've got an education branch that, take school kids to their local river and do river dipping, look at invertebrates. There's restoration projects. So, for instance, in Enfield, the borough of Enfield, we're helping restore some rivers to make them more wild and natural, and actually helping with some beaver reintroductions there. Um, and then a lot of sort of research over London looking at sources of pollution and campaigning to for a cleaner River Thames and all its tributaries. We're a Rivers Trust. We're part of the Rivers Trust movement. There's lots of Rivers Trusts around the UK, so wherever you live, you will have a local Rivers Trust. People always ask this. Between 6 and 10% of our funding comes from Thames Water, so they're not a dominant funder, but they do provide some funding. We sort of see ourselves as a critic of Thames Water. So and yeah, our events and our latest news, if you're heading London way, it's good to have a quick look at our events page because there's lots of fun stuff on. So yeah, catchment partnerships. What is a catchment partnership? What is a river catchment? This is sort of going back to school geography. But a catchment is an area of land where all the water falling on it drains eventually into a single river. They're called different things. In the States, they're often called a drainage basin, and they're bounded around the outside by the watershed, which is an area of high ground. The Environment Agency recognises over 100 river catchments just in England. And a catchment partnership is sort of a way of working for healthier rivers. Our rivers, as you probably know, are in a lot of trouble. So the catchment partnership recognises that basically everyone in the catchment will affect the river. I mean, if you think about it, everything that we put on the land, down our sinks, down our toilets, on our roads, will, eventually find its way to the lowest point in the land, which is the river. So we all have a stake in our river, really. So a catchment partnership tries to bring together as many different people as possible to work collaboratively. And how can you actually make rivers healthier? Well, there's lots and lots of different ways. It can be about improving the habitat of the river, restoring it. So that often means breaking it out of artificial, straightened off boundaries. Research to look at where pollution is coming from, education, working with farmers and landowners to improve their land management so less pollution goes to the water. Of course, campaigning for better sewage treatment. So yes, there's lots of things that you can do as a catchment partnership. This is quite interesting. Oxford is in the centre of this picture, and yeah, it's actually at the join of sort of 5 different river catchments, or they all join pretty close by, and all these smaller rivers flow into the Thames, part of sort of the Thames headwaters. So the centre of Oxford is in the Och catchment officially, but the east of it is in the Cherwell and Ray catchment. And all of these catchments have their own catchment partnership as well, and lots of them are doing really amazing work as well. But yes, I'm going to talk about the Cherwell and Ray Catchment Partnership. So you have these catchment partnership hosts, and for the Cherwell and Ray, it's the Wildlife Trust and Thames 21. We've been co-hosting for since late 2022, so it's relatively new. We've got about 30 member organisations, but we'd like more. So if you know more, if you want to join, please chat to me afterwards. We have sort of quarterly meetings, and we have working groups specifically about different issues. We've got this great resource, which is this story map, which sort of explains the catchment in different maps and images. And currently, what we're working on are developing these farm clusters, which is sort of farmers working together for better land and water management in the Ray and in the Northeast Cotswolds. A couple of habitat improvement projects in Banbury and on Hook Norton Brook. And then what I'm going to talk about today is our citizen science water quality monitoring. And yes, it's kind of run on a shoestring a bit at the moment. There's only sort of 2 days a week paid staff time. But yeah, we're looking into getting more funding for this. So river health. Anyone a river scientist or freshwater scientist or know much about river health already? I want to confess before I.
Well, I'd say Claire, over the years, I think we've all, because we're all eco people, just butting in here as you've asked.
Yeah, go on.
Growing up in Killington, born in Oxford, yeah, living by a river, Cherwell, and also the canal, by the way, Oxford Canal. It's another watercourse. We've all heard so much over the years that I think, although we may not be professionally qualified, I think the general public in this area have a lot of local knowledge about rivers and a sense of when things go wrong. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that really ties into some of the messages from this as well. Yeah, I started off I was doing a PhD in freshwater on ponds, but also I'm a keen outdoor swimmer, and I sort of fell into this field a bit because I was just campaigning to get cleaner rivers, and there was just so much to do that I kept doing it and still doing it. So. Yes, so river health, is really broad. It's influenced by water quality, water quantity, and habitat. And water quality also can be made up of lots of different things like the oxygen levels, and pollutants like ammonia, phosphate, and nitrate, the temperature, all sorts of things. With our program, we focus on phosphate and nitrate, because they're quite easy to measure and cheap to measure. But also they are really clear indicators of the health of the river. They're both like essential nutrients for plant growth and algal growth, but if you get too much, you can get eutrophication, which is when the plants and the algae start to dominate, and then that can reduce light levels, and also once they die and decompose, the bacteria which are decomposing them use up a lot of the oxygen. So the Environment Agency also assess all water bodies in England every 3 years. It used to be, but it's been reduced to every 5 years, which is another reason why we do this citizen science testing. In law, there's a target for all water bodies to be in good status by 2027, but at the last assessment, only 15%, 1-5, met this. It is quite strict. So basically, if it doesn't, they measure lots of different things. Some of the things I mentioned, like phosphates, ammonia, oxygen. They also look at the invertebrates and the plants. And it is quite strict because if only one of them doesn't pass, then the whole catchment will not pass and will not be able to reach good. So it's rightly strict, but it is worth bearing that in mind. So if you look at this map of the catchment, you can see, so green is good, yellow is classed as moderate, orange is poor, and red is bad. So in the Cherwell and Ray catchment, according to the Environment Agency, only one of the sort of sub-catchments reaches good status, whereas the others are moderate, poor or bad. However, 2/3 of the sort of elements that they've measured meet good or high status. So it doesn't mean that the river is totally dead and unhealthy in every single way. There are, healthy stretches and healthy elements of all our rivers and streams around here. So this is the method that we use. It's supported by Earthwatch and their Freshwater Watch programme. And it's nice and simple. Joe's done it with me at Makespace. You have these testing tubes. You get some water from the river, you measure out a certain amount, you suck up the water into the tube, and you wait for 5 or 3 minutes, and you get a colour change. And the colour change, then you, compare it on the chart, and you get a reading. And really the first 2 bar colours on the chart are low pollution or clean. The middle one is sort of moderately polluted, and then above is high nutrient pollution. So yeah, very simple, anyone can do it. And you enter the results into the app and they automatically go onto an online map. So it began in March 2023 with Banbury CAG. They decided they wanted to do this. And then in September of that year, a new group got set up further down the catchment. So then we were covering the north bit and the southern bit of the catchment. And it's really grown amazingly since then. So we've got 18 months of data. We've got about 25 sites that are tested every month, and many more sort of people who do it more ad hoc. We have a monthly newsletter, and we have events for volunteers. So you can see one of those on the left. We had a Vital Signs of Healthy Rivers event. And people often ask why are you doing citizen science if we know that the rivers are unhealthy, if the Environment Agency do all these assessments anyway? One big reason is that the Environment Agency monitoring is reducing almost all the time. Budgets are getting more and more cut, and often they base their sort of health assessments on just 1 or 2 points, so you can fill a lot of gaps. And secondly, it's actually, local people, as you were saying, Igor, they know their rivers, they love their rivers, they know when things are going wrong, probably better than some, field officer from the Environment Agency who just comes in once a, year sometimes to do a sample. So it's also about getting those boots on the ground and looking at the river and, knowing your local communities, so make it easier to talk about and find people to find solutions as well. So yeah, we've actually had 562 samples taken in total, which is amazing. So it's a huge amount of volunteer effort and hours. If you think each one of those is someone going out on their weekend and taking a sample. Hopefully it's fun as well. You get to go down to the river and have a nice day out. This just sort of shows by month. We had quite a lot of variation. In February, we had a water blitz event, so an event where we did lots of samples over one weekend. And then this map on the left shows where the samples are concentrated. So you can see that the Cherwell and Ray Catchment actually goes really far north. It goes into Northamptonshire and Warwickshire, so don't have that many people testing up there. But we've got pretty good coverage elsewhere, and especially on the main rivers, the Cherwell and Ray. So these are our overall results. So as you can see, on the left, you've got the sort of levels of how to classify them. And then on the right, you've got the pie charts. So it's really almost the inverse of each other. So for phosphate, you've got 70% of samples are clean. That's good, not polluted by phosphate. 11% are moderately polluted, and then about 18% have high pollution. Whereas with nitrate, 90% of them are showing pollution or some moderate pollution. So yes, very different picture. And then, yeah, it's worth thinking about where these come from, these nutrients. Because the reason there's lots and lots in rivers, they wouldn't naturally be there. Um, so and they are also the almost exact inverse of each other as well. So phosphate, 70% comes from sewage and about 25% from agriculture. And in nitrate, for nitrate, 70% comes from agriculture and about 30% from sewage. So that means in the winter, when you're getting more rainfall, you're getting more runoff from the fields, you're getting fewer plants taking up nutrients, that you're going to get more nitrate running off and into rivers. So you'd expect nitrates to be higher in the winter and lower in the summer. Whereas with phosphate, what you'd expect, the population doesn't change massively over the year. So you've got the sewage output is pretty constant. So you'd expect phosphate to be higher in the summer as the river level's lower and it gets more concentrated, and lower in the winter as it's more diluted. Does that make sense? Or does anyone have a question about that? I'm gonna assume from the silence that that makes sense. It's great. So what we saw sort of kind of conformed to that pattern that we'd expect. So nitrates at the top, and you can see sort of a peak in September, actually getting lower sort of over the winter, and lowest in May, and then starting to go up a little bit again in August. So yeah, it is a sort of peak in March as well. So the March peak might be related to fertilizer application with lots of rainfall. The September peak, it might be that yeah, the rainfall and the plants sort of dying cause that. But yeah, not totally sure, but it's not exactly what we'd expect. Phosphate levels do seem to be higher in the summer in general, and you can see like a clear dip between December and April in the mean phosphate. However, we have got this big peak in October and in August of this year as well, which we think is related to like extra raw sewage spills that we've been seeing. Yeah, so that's the sort of story with those. And then this is sort of geographically what we see. So with nitrate, it really is, quite a sorry story that, all the purple and black catchments, the average nitrate is very high. It's between 2 and 5 milligrams per litre, which is really high. And that affects, it does affect the life in the river, but it's also bad for humans as well because our drinking water, if it has too much nitrate in it, that's bad for our health, particularly of very young children. So drinking water, I think about 30% of it now has to be treated or blended to get rid of the excess nitrate. And what we've seen is even in the sort of headwaters, we're getting, especially the Cherwell, the headwaters north of Banbury, we're seeing very high nitrate. So it's likely that the nitrate is in the groundwater, and it's kind of a legacy of lots of years of pollution. A large amount of the land is in the catchment is arable or improved grassland, so they receive those fertilizer inputs. The lower areas, the really low one, that's probably because most of the samples were of ponds in that catchment, so that's a bit of an outlier. The lower one in the headwaters of the Ray makes sense because there's a lot of woodland up there. There isn't so much farming. It's in the headwaters, so that's promising that where the Ray is emerging, it's not already polluted. So we're starting with a cleaner river. Phosphates, more of a mixed bag. You can see the sort of main river Cherwell is sort of moderate. The main river Ray is poor. Around Bicester, we've got some poor areas, and up here as well in the Farthinghose stream. We've also got some good areas as well. So the headwaters of the Swere, this is the Sawbrook, the Bloxham Brook. So that's good. That sort of indicates that in those areas, sewage treatment is doing what it should be doing. or there aren't sewage treatment works. And in the other areas, we should be looking at the sewage treatment works in that area. This is more of a, this is a map sort of more in depth of some sample points on the River Ray. Down in the bottom left is Islip, and then you've got Bicester sort of in the middle. And the river flows from east to west, so it's flowing from Buckinghamshire through this very flat landscape down to Islip. It's joined by all these tributaries from the north and some from the south, and it joins the Cherwell at Islip. The Ray's an interesting river. It's very flat. It's one of the lowest gradients in the country. And also you've got some really important wet meadows in the Ray that have incredible wildflowers. If you go to sort of around Blackthorn, that area, there's a big Wildlife Trust nature reserve that they're adding to, and they're all ancient floodplain meadows with loads of different flowers and species. And then obviously you've got Otmoor as well, RSPB Otmoor, that's one of the most important wetland areas in the country, and does take some water from the River Ray, although most of it comes from rainwater. So what our testers have found is that the Environment Agency classes the whole of this stretch of the River Ray, the mid-stretch, as bad. But what we are seeing is that, yes, it's good in the headwaters, but actually around these floodplain meadows, it still remains sort of moderate nitrate and low phosphate. So those are doing their job to protect the river and stop pollutants going in there. But it's really when you get further west and south of Charlton and Otmoor treatment works that you get this big leap up in the pollutants. And again at Islip, and again south of Bletchington and Weston on the Green sewage treatment works. So, we would like focus in that area. And also what we're seeing is very high nitrates in Bicester, which is quite unusual because that's an urban environment. So we should be looking into what's happening there. And then a sort of better picture in one of these smaller streams. So these points are just places where there's been at least 6 repeat samples. So I've excluded all other points, and these are the points where volunteers have done repeat samples. So on the back of this, what do we do next? So we advocate for Charlton and Otmoor to get a sewage upgrade. It doesn't have any upgrades planned. And pressure there are planned upgrades to Marsh Gibbon, Weston on the Green, Bletchington, and a couple of others. So pressure for them to go forward in time. And then also continuing to expand on the work of our farm cluster. So adding more farms to that and really making them aware of the new ELMS payments for water protection. And then in Bicester, running what's called an outfall safari to look for these misconnections that might be causing that high nitrate in Bicester. So that's just sort of an example in one area where our citizen science is sort of pointing to what we should prioritise, where we should look next. For instance, where we should look for farms to add to the farm cluster, because up here we're seeing pretty low nitrates. So that sort of indicates that the farms are not being a big source, but further down the nitrates have increased. So we need to look more in the farms in the west. Okay, it's doing a fancy thing. So this is our sort of examination of the Cherwell itself. The canal runs alongside the Cherwell. It's a really beautiful stretch, this. If you've been on a narrowboat or walked up it, it's just gorgeous. It's in like a narrow valley and beautiful villages and woods and the river. And yes, and these are all the places. I should say the grey circles are sewage treatment works if you haven't figured that out already. These are all the places where volunteers have been out sampling. So you can see, high nitrogen all the way down really, other than right at the confluence, which is interesting. But the phosphate's the thing that varies. Um, this is quite an interesting site, Flight's Mill and Pigeon Lock, because they're actually right next to each other, but one is on the canal and one is on the river. So why is phosphate so much higher on the river than on the canal? Might be the opposite of what people expect. You expect the canal to be more polluted than the river, but in this case, it's the river. Um, Thankfully, when you go downstream again, the phosphate's gone down again. So this is also to show that the river can recover quite quickly after a pollution input. And rivers are quite resilient. And if they're allowed to do their natural processes, a lot of the vegetation can take up that phosphate. And it could do this even better if we have more sort of buffers around our rivers to buffer those nutrients before they even get to the river. Yeah, Kidlington got a bit higher again. Islip higher, which we'd expect because the ray has come in. And then through Oxford, you've got that stretch of really, again, ancient floodplain meadows that have never been built on, never been ploughed and cultivated, haven't had fertilizers on them. So it's quite unexpected that we've got such high nitrate and pretty high phosphate by Magdalen College. So that's a bit of an indication of what we should be looking at next. And then Aston's Eye Nature Reserve. There's two locations there. One is a small tributary, the Shire Lake Ditch, which has some misconnections on it or into it. But those are being looked at and have been sort of partly dealt with. But then, thankfully, when the Cherwell meets the Thames, we've actually got nice low phosphate on average there, and actually lower nitrate than upstream. So actually looking in Oxford and yeah, working out what's going on within Oxford. Are there actually old plumbing from the colleges and things that are going into the river and making it more polluted than it should be? We should be sort of checking on that, and I'd like to think the university and the colleges would want to have a clean river in Oxford, especially as this area's got so much punting and it used to be a popular swimming site. But also, yeah, also working with farmers as well. It's such a narrow valley. It's pretty easy to work out who the farmers are because it's not a big area that actually the Cherwell's collecting nitrates from. And also sort of preserve and celebrate the really healthy reaches. So up at Hayford, there's actually some really beautiful reaches full of aquatic vegetation. So making sure that they keep being monitored and we protect those. So my last one is just the River Swere. I think it's Swere. So this is near Hook Norton. The Hook Norton Brewery, don't know if anyone's a beer drinker, they use groundwater. So, you know, they have an interest in clean water, and their well is, you know, somewhere up here in the west of this picture. And we've got a volunteer who's sampling just downstream of the brewery, actually. So they haven't done 6 samples yet, so I couldn't put it on the map, but it's looking at the moment good up there. Really pretty, beautiful area with actually some fens in and some quite unusual habitat. But yeah, we got very clearly here. I mean, nitrates are high all over, which, as you have heard, is a theme. But phosphates are low in lots of places, apart from downstream of the sewage treatment works, where they are, you know, really high, and it's really clear that that is negatively impacting the stream there. Thankfully, the farmer there is really interested in working with us, and we're looking to rewild the river there. And actually, it's actually at the moment above the floodplain, and so to restore it, you can break down some banks and get it to weave over the floodplain again. But also, Thames Water have promised an upgrade to Hook Norton. So, you know, a big part is going to make sure that this happens and happens on time. So it was meant to be at the end of this year. It's been pushed to the end of next year now. So yeah, so the nitrates big problem, quite hard to deal with because there's so many different farmers involved. A large part of it is getting, the subsidies right that I'm sure you heard about for lots of different, issues in nature. It's getting agriculture, working for nature as well. That's just as true for rivers as anything else. Sewage treatment, however, is something that should be fit for the 21st century, and we know who's doing that very clearly. It's Thames Water, and it's also all of us as well, and what we put down the toilet. But Thames Water are the people who are meant to be dealing with that. So that is something that we really can clearly target. There's been a lot of focus on raw sewage spills, rightly so, because they should, only ever happen in exceptional circumstances, and they're happening very frequently. At some of our locations in the Cherwell and Ray, it's about a third of the year that they're not actually treating the sewage, it's just going straight into the river. However, the treated effluent can also be polluting as well. So it's a mix of having enough capacity to actually treat the sewage from the population, but also having that treatment working well, so you're removing the phosphate and hopefully most of the bacteria before it goes back into the river. And what, as Thames 21, what we really would like to see is a lot more nature-based solutions. So for instance, constructed wetlands at the end of the pipe at the end. So sewage treatment goes through several different rounds. Well, only two actually. So you just settle out the solids and then you put it through this filter beds, which actually has bacteria that break down most of the pollutants. And then in our current system, then that goes straight into a watercourse. However, there's loads of evidence that adding wetlands before it goes back into the watercourse can take up a huge amount of phosphate, nitrate, but also, really quite nasty things like pharmaceuticals and some of the chemicals that get down there as well. Like there's a lot of plants that can begin to break those down. So we'd like to see a lot more of that. Thames Water at the moment are, because they're such a poorly environmentally performing company, the Environment Agency doesn't actually allow them to do sort of stuff outside of their own assets because they need to fix them first before they can start to look at the rest of the catchment. So it's a bit of a catch-22 in a way, but we'll, I feel confident we'll get there. And even if that's, private landowners, but downstream of sewage treatment works, like the Hook Norton example, that can start to make these nature-based solutions to sewage pollution. So yeah, 18 of our 46 locations met the investigation trigger level, and there's upgrades due to a lot of the locations in the Cherwell and Ray, but 8 of those have been delayed from before 2025 to post 2025. This is a common theme across Thames Water's whole area. They've delayed 108 schemes, so the taxpayers essentially paying for them twice. But yes, what we're focusing on is, really clearly making the case for sometimes these smaller rural sewage treatment works that get overlooked, but can still be a big source of pollution because they're going into such small streams. And also they don't get upgraded as often as the larger urban centres. And also, they're easier to upgrade because they're a bit smaller. It's not such a big cost, but it can still have a really positive effect. So yeah, these are just some priorities if you live near any of these. Boddington, very far north, Middleton, Cheney, Hook Norton, Marsh Gibbon. Fantastic names in this catchment, I've just got to say. And Charlton on Otmore. Marsh Gibbon.
To be Claire,
yes.
sorry to butt in.
Go on.
Hope you don't mind. Could you, I know you're in full flow. I didn't quite catch your River Suir summary. I think it was up for a second or so. Um,
Oh, right. Yeah, I can go back a couple.
thank
There you go.
Thank you. Just to see what you recommended there. Again, yeah, as you say, push for the STW upgrade, not to be delayed any further. Okay, and identify landowners to engage with. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Appreciate
There's
it. Cheers.
Yeah, the Northeast Cotswold Farm Cluster is really great. They're mainly in the even load, but they're starting to move into the Cherwell and Ray as well, and they've got lots of members and they've done lots of exciting things like reconnecting the even load to the floodplain and yeah, working with farmers to actually make that work for them as well. Um, so they're worth checking out. Um, so yes, it can feel, it's a big problem. It can feel quite overwhelming. I suppose I want to emphasize that, clean rivers are totally possible. As I said before, rivers, can recover quickly. Um, there are these nature-based solutions to pollution. And, I spent some of the summer, I was in Munich and Vienna, which are massive cities, and they have these amazing swimmable rivers that have come about because people there, really campaigned for it and fought for it. And they've got good sewage treatment works, but they've also, rewilded areas of their rivers as well. So, and yeah, thousands of people use them and swim in them, and it's just totally normal. So, and I just think that's how it should be here as well. And I think we will get there because I think that's what everybody wants. Just it's a it's a feels like fighting an uphill battle sometimes. However, locally, what can you do? If you wanted to, you could become a water quality tester. It's good fun. It gets you outdoors, and you're contributing to this, important data set that we're building, and part of actually a national Freshwater Watch program and even international, and sort of showing the Environment Agency and the regulators that people really care and that, local people are actually fantastic monitors and protectors of their rivers. Um, Sign up to a catchment partnership newsletter. It goes out monthly. I sort of do local events and kind of summary of the last month's data. And yeah, we have talks from time to time. I think a big one is just talking to people in your community about water quality. I think people know a lot about sewage, and yeah, probably a bit fatigued about that, but that you know know more about what we put on the land and how that can influence the water. And yeah, if you have any neighbours that you think, or any areas near you that you think, oh, that river's, looks a bit, it's got litter in it, or it's quite straight, and it could look healthier. What could I do? Yeah, get in touch and chat to other people. And then another one is, there's a lot of development that is, um, yeah, on the cards for Oxfordshire, a lot of house building. And, we know at the moment the sewage infrastructure isn't adequate for our current population. So really emphasising that with your local representatives that we need to have these upgrades. If we're going to have if we're going to have house building, we need to have the infrastructure there. I mean, the government have said as much. So trying to hold their feet to the fire on that. A very local one is the Cherwell District Council have a consultation on housing strategy out. At the moment, I think it mentions water once and infrastructure 4 times in quite a large document. So even just, responding to that consultation, and pointing that out, I'm going to do a template response for people. And then really importantly, reporting pollution when you see it. This is the sort of basis of everything. So it's what I'm sort of going to leave as the take-home message is, yeah, report it to the Environment Agency. As I said at the beginning, you know your local river the best. If you see any of the following signs, um, the really severe thing might be dead fish, but it could also be an oily sheen on the water, bad smell, or the colour looks different. Don't be afraid to report it. It's free, and they don't come out to everyone, but the more people who report things, the more it gets bumped up the list and the more they actually go out to see it. Um, Also, then if you have time, report it to Thames Water as well if you think it's Thames Water related. And to be fair to them, they are actually pretty good at getting out and being responsive about what they've done about issues. So yes, I think that's the end of the talk. I'll stop sharing my screen now.